The way that the world is going with all of the the data that just comes in online, there's like no kind of structure in what the data is that we're using. It seems that the information we keep from day to day is becoming more and more just crazy. It's just like it's whatever data we happen to be using for that week is what we collect, and then this week and what we collect next week, those two data sets may be entirely different. And so when you're using a table system like an SQL, as much as we may like SQL, you do have to go back and redesign your table system, which is just crazy. So that's why we're spending so much time talking about Mongo, and we're talking about actually editing documents today. And by editing documents, this is really what I'm talking about when you're if you're collecting data and then you find that the data is like simply brand new and then you have to change something. Well, you don't have to go to the schema and change things, but rather you can just change, you'll see here, but you can just send the code directly to the table which is already there and have everything just be written up and saved as a regular database. Anyway, I think you'll see what I mean in a second here. So go ahead and get your containers started. Hopefully you have your containers working by now. If they're not working, then that means that there's something wrong with your Docker configuration, perhaps. I think these commands should be more or less fairly straightforward. And by that, I mean that you could just go ahead and pull over your Mongo, your Mongo container and all the associated files, and then it should just be able to run when you type in these commands here. Now, these commands, remember, are for Windows. I know that for many of you, you know this. You've heard me say this all week. But I still had a couple of emails over the weekend just asking how to actually get a Mongo container started here. Well, you start here. Go back to your slides and start here, and then try these commands and see whether they work. And if they don't work, it could be that your Docker container, your Docker software, isn't working. In fact, I've had several mails from people who are using Windows machines, and after some kind of a Windows update, I'm not a Windows person, so I don't really know what the update was, but after a Windows update, they had to reinstall Docker to use it again. I'm not really sure why that happened. That just seems really unfortunate. But go ahead and reinstall Docker, and then run these commands again, and you should be good to go. It should work just fine. Okay, so I'm just checking my notes here to make sure I have nothing else on that to talk about. What we're actually using to start our Docker container, if you're using Windows, you'd use this command down. You'd use that to actually run the stuff in the container. But if you haven't built the container, you'd use this, and you can use this command over here, I guess. This one pull to actually install the software on your machine, and then this command here runs, actually kind of creates the container. Then this one here actually starts up your container and runs Mongo and does all that good stuff. I think that actually you can just run this from the very get-go, and then run this. I think that works just the same. But if you've already installed your this is if your container, if the container is already installed. But if you've already installed the container, you can just type this in each time, and they should be able to get into your container. But for me, though, I'm being lazy, and I'm not actually closing out my container. Just because I always use it, and so I don't want to have to go back and have to remove the container or anything like that if anything goes wrong. So I just leave it running in the background, that's what I'd recommend to you if you wouldn't, if you don't object to that, just so that you have it, so that every time you want to use Mongo for this class, you just run this one command here, and I'll copy this, and come with me to the terminal. And when I paste this into terminal, just like this. Actually, maybe I'll get out of this directory. I don't want to be in there. Let's see. CD. And then I'll just paste this in there. And then if I type in my password, there. So now, because my container was already running, I never closed it down. I never stopped it. And then I can just go ahead and get inside here. And this looks to be like Linux, but actually this is my container, and I can tell that I'm in there because of root. Anyway, I know that for many of you, you've heard this so many times. You're probably tired of me talking about it. I just wanted to get that out there just so that everybody knows, if you're having trouble with your Docker setup, it could be because you just need to reinstall it after the Windows update was affected I think it was last Tuesday it came out. So if you had some trouble between now and Tuesday of last week, it's probably because of that update. So I'd recommend just reinstalling and then going back to these slides. Okay, so this is actually how we get into Mongo. Once you actually have started your container, you can get inside by just typing in Mongo. That's another email that I had over, I think it was on Saturday afternoon, where you have to actually type in Mongo to get inside, and then once you're inside, then you can start, working with your database. Right. So anyway, I've just typed in Mongo, and everything's okay, and we're in. So let's get to the slides and talk about what we're doing today. So what are we doing exactly today? What we're talking about is we're going to be working with inserting not one, but actually many different documents at the same time. And so you might actually do this in the real world. I mean, for instance, what we've been doing before is we've been loading our Docker database with just one thing at a time, one document at a time. And while that works out okay, we have this other command here called insert many, which helps us to install like many different documents at the same time quickly, and you might use this in some of your code. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to I think actually I need to go back to I'll go back here to my terminal, and I need to type in a command here, show collections. If I type in show collection, you'll see that there's nothing there. So then I see, I'm basically trying to find a place where I can create my database. Show DBS, show databases. And I'm actually using this database here. So I'm going to just type in use my DB. And what that does for me now is it allows me to go inside and see my collections. I'll bet you that I've already installed the same database before. Oops. And I have. In fact, this is the stuff from today. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop some of this stuff here. So I can type in DB. And actually, what are we working with today? We're talking about restaurants as our database today. Restaurants. In fact, I'm just going to copy this because I'm lazy. Don't tell anybody. And then you type in drop, and then if I type in that, it says true. And so that means that the database is now gone. It's gone. You can't get it back. But remember what's just happened here. Before we typed in this show collections, we had to type in use my DB. This gets me into kind of I guess the best way of thinking about this is like to take you into a chapter of a book, and then the collections are like the pages in the book, in the book's chapter. So this has taken me into my database chapter, and this is where I'm actually working with my collections. I can drop some other things here too, but I won't bother with that just yet. I'll keep employee. Articles was another database that I was working with, another collection that I was working with that has some other things that I was using for this class. Anyway, but don't worry about that. So let's get back to the slides. Come with me if you will. And we are going to install a new database called restaurants. Restaurants, I think you just go ahead and copy this. I'm going to try and copy this and see whether this works. When I say I'll try, it's like I don't know whether we have to format this first before it actually works. So come with me back to the terminal, and I'll paste this in there, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. And yes, it worked. How do I know that it worked? Because I'm looking at this part right down here where it says inserted IDs. It inserted my IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. What is that? What are these IDs that it's talking about? Well, we'll get to that in a second here. Let me just show you that the collection, my restaurants collection was installed. And in fact, I can even type in a command to search it. I'll type DB. That's basically my way of saying, hey, database, wake up. I have a command for you. So you type in db.restaurants. Hopefully I'm spelling this correctly. I was not the best speller at school, I should tell you that. And you type in .find. Another thing you can type in, if that's too crazy to read, if it's just all over the place, you can type in pretty. Oops. I'm basically typing in restaurants.finds.pretty, and that kind of makes everything nice and organized. Now, getting back to the message that we saw where it says here, inserted IDs. These were the IDs that I actually gave my database. In fact, I gave this collection my own IDs just because perhaps maybe it worked out better for my particular needs. And so if you go back to our slides, you'll notice that, for instance, I have actually specified the IDs manually. I just did that because it's easier to kind of see the IDs, and also you might have code, for instance, that's working with, like as we did in Django, code that's actually working with, like, for instance, numbers of each record that's in there. And so if you're trying to pull this over and use some software like that, where you need to keep track of like regular just numerical IDs, not alphanumeric but numerical IDs, then maybe, for instance, it's best to actually establish these IDs yourself. And you do that by this. So getting back to my actual my terminal here, this is saying that the inserted IDs manually created were actually installed, and that's where this all comes from here. Right. So when I do my kind of my open-ended query to see what's in there, this tells me what I've got, and I've basically got ID 1. And remember, these are restaurants that I'm coming up together with. These are all, the names are all made up. But they are restaurants nonetheless. And in these restaurants, I have information about the name, this is called the Central Perk Cafe. The borough, this is a word that really means, where is this place? Like, what's the neighborhood for this restaurant? This is Manhattan. And then I have this other piece of information here called the average cost. And the average cost could be, for instance, if you're going there, maybe 2 people for dinner, how much money would you expect to spend? In fact, if you go to some travel guides in, for traveling, certain guides for traveling will say, here's a good restaurant, the average cost is this much money. And what they mean by that is that, let's say 2 people go there, you have drinks and you have food and hors d'oeuvres and a dessert. This is kind of like what your check is going to come up to be. Anyway, so that's just information here. We see that there's another restaurant here called Rockefeller Bar and Grill. I've made these names up to protect the innocents. We have the Empire State Pub. We have the Captain's Cafe. We have the Resto in the Cave, which is in Paris. And then we have the Crowbar. These are all different, these are all made up names. But still, these are all names that we can use in our database. And so what we're going to be doing with this database, if you come back, is we're going to be amending these documents in some way such that we're going to be adding more information. Now, if we were SQL programmers and this was an SQL database, this would actually be rather scary because we couldn't just go ahead and change this stuff. I mean, supposing this were an SQL, we have a name attribute, we have a borrow attribute, and then we have an average costs attribute. These are columns in our tables. We would not be able to go ahead and add more information. But today, we do exactly that. So let's go ahead and see what we get for this. So I'm going to alter. I'll just show you first, and I'll explain how it works. But I'm going to go ahead and just show this particular. I'm going to copy and paste this, but I'll show you this particular entry for the Empire State Pub. So if I go back to my terminal and I paste this in there, remember what we have? This is really all defined parameters. Otherwise, everything else is the same. db.restaurants.find. And then inside here, this is going to be, my information about which document am I looking at. And so this says, go to the document where you find the word or the words Empire State Pub for the name. So this is like, the first curly braces you have here is which document am I looking at? And over here, this second curly braces tells me, okay, inside that document, what do you want to see? Let me just show you something else before I go on here, just because we're on a roll. If I go ahead and just leave those blank like this, then this is just showing me all the documents. But if I change this to the Empire State Pub, the name Empire State Pub, what this thing does is it says, here's the document where name is the Empire State Pub. Therefore, we're going to focus our attention on that document. And so that is really the big difference between a command like that, and a command that looks like this. Now, one more thing I'm going to talk about before I actually move on. I just want to make this absolutely sure that everyone gets this. But if I go ahead and push enter, you'll see that I get this ID, I get name, I'm really in borrow, I get violations, I get average cost. I'm getting all the information here. But imagine now that I only really care about seeing the average cost. And so what I could do here in the second curly braces, don't forget, by the way, to add your comma. I put average cost in quotes, and then I have a colon, and then I have to say 1 saying, show me the average cost. Now you'll notice that the only thing I see now, when I actually specify something here, the only thing that I see is the average cost, whereas everything else, all the other information, all the metadata, if you will, none of that actually shows up. In fact, I can go even further, and I can put a comma here, and I can say, let's not look at the ID anymore. I don't want to see that because that's just, I don't need to see that for this result. I can put a 0 there, and then when I push enter, I just get the average cost. But I need to see the name, so I could go ahead and say, okay, well, give me the name. So I can put a 1 here, and then I get the name, and then the average cost. I think that the order that you see how we have name in front of average cost being shown in this thing, but actually we put average cost first and then we put the name. I think that the order that these things get shown in right here is the order that they appear in the actual document. So you can see that the name in the document came first and then average cost came second. Even though we actually restrain, or we have a restraints where we're actually saying show me the average cost as the first thing, don't show me the ID, and then show me the name. So the order, this order doesn't count. This order, I think, below, this order comes from the order of how the stuff is actually laid out in the document. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing here, but I think that's an important discussion to have because I think that it's quite interesting. So I'm going to go back here and we're going to look at this name Empire State Pub. So actually we're concentrating only on this document here, the Empire State Pub. So let's go back to the slides. Come with me. And we're going to go back here and we're going to use this command here, this piece of code here called set, $set. Now what $set does is it will add new metadata or new pieces of information to the document. And what it will do here is you have all the stuff here that's between the curly braces. What it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, we're going to find the name. I'll go through all this code in a second here, but first of all, we're concentrating on this document where we have the Empire State Pub. And then what we need to do now is in this area, we're saying, here's a restraint. We're actually going to update. In fact, there's this update command here, but here's like your restraint here. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing or adding. If it's there already, then we change it. But if it's not there, then it's added. But we're going to be changing or adding rate and the status. And that basically means if whatever the rating said before is now going to be changed to or updated to thumbs up. And whatever the status said before, we're going to change that to loved it. But if none of these things existed before, then they get added. Then we have this current date right here. This is actually kind of important. This is important programming because when you are telling people, or when you update your database, typically you want to be able to say when that update was actually effected. And in this case, it's actually very important because what we're doing is this is a database, remember, for restaurants. And so we're going to be updating our restaurants with reviews. And so this is our review. So go ahead and copy this in, if you will, if you can. Just copy that part there from DB Restaurants Update 1. And then the first curly braces here says, find the record where name is equal to Empire State Pub. And then when you're inside, when you find that record, then insert this stuff into the document. So let's go back. Come with me now. And I'll go here. And I can paste that in there. Now, the command that I typed in before, just at the top of the screen here, you see this DB restaurants find. I put that command in there so that you could run that before you make your change, and then run it after you make your change so that you can see that the change actually was effected. I'm going to put my pretty there. There. I should have done that before, but I didn't. But you can see, though, that before just running the Empire State Pub, there was no information here about the rating or the status. But now, when I look at it, I can see that actually I have 3 new things that were added. I have last modified, which is the date from right now, which you can see is the dates that we have here, and the time, T. Time is... My Docker container doesn't have the right time in it for some reason. This is suggesting that it's actually 4 in the afternoon, but actually it isn't. That's something I never configured in Docker, but I should have done. But still, though, you have this in a real system, though, you wouldn't have to worry about that. You just have a regular time. And you need to know that time if you're updating your database, because supposing you're updating your database and then you go through again and you update it again and again, you might need to know like when the last time was that a database has actually been updated, so that you know whether you have to actually affect the update again. I mean, maybe if it's already updated, then you don't need to go through and add anything. But the new things that we've added here are rating and the status. Are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions over what's going on? I don't want to just talk your ear off here. I do kind of hope that this is going to be, well, that if you have any questions, you'll just go ahead and kind of ask them, just so that you have them. Okay. Let's go back to the slides then. If and when you have questions, you know how to reach me. Okay, let's do another one here. Let's affect another one here. The next update I'd like to do is the Central Perk Cafe. I thought that was kind of funny. These names actually came to me when last I went to New York City, and I was walking around and there was a Central Park Cafe, and I thought, hey, how about calling it the Central Perk Cafe? I thought this was such a great idea, and there was this old lady who was sitting on a bench in Central Park Mall. I went to see Strawberry Fields. I'm gonna go and pay my respects to late John Lennon. But I went and I was just sitting down there and I saw this Central Park Cafe or restaurant or bistro, and there's some lady on a park bench next to where I saw this, and I said to her, "Hey, wouldn't that be funny if that were Central Perk Cafe?" And she just looked at me as if I had 4 heads, and I thought maybe I shouldn't say anything more to people in the park. Seriously, she just stared at me. I felt really bad. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at this Central Perk Cafe. In fact, if I put this pretty clause on the end, then you'll see that, for instance, you have nothing that's really there. I'm going to go ahead and change things, and so come with me back to the slides. I'm going to take these slides here, and again, I'm using this update 1, which really means update 1 document. Find the document for which the name is equal to the Central Perk Cafe. Oh, Billy, we're offline, then. How extraordinary. Oh, let me just send out a message.
I'll have to restart it anyway.
Thank you. Oh, zoot.
I mean, you can always join bank once it's...
You too?
What?
No internet?
No.
We just reset it.
Okay.
And How extraordinary. I'm going to do this again. Not sure exactly what happened here. I'm going to start this up again. Hello. Na na da 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 da. Join. Okay. I hope everyone can hear me. Can everyone? Rachel, can you tell me again whether you can hear me? I'm not sure that I know what just happened there, but hopefully I'm back online. I had a technical issue where the I guess my internet. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Wesley. My internet was actually I don't know. It just stopped working, and then I waited for like 2 minutes, and then it came back on again. It's magic. It's just magic. I'm still impressed with the internet. I know that sounds really crazy. Okay, anyway, I am sorry about that. I hope that we don't have any more interruptions. I'm trying to get back to where I was before I lose my train of thought here. Here. So anyway, what we're talking about now is we're going back to the Central Park Cafe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change out I'm going to add some more information to my Central Park Cafe, where I'm going to actually copy this information and dump it in here. So let me go back here and I'll go ahead and copy that. And then I'm going to go, if you will, come with me to my prompt here, my terminal, and you'll see that there's nothing here. And so when I paste this in there, this is all the code here. Again, it's looking for the name, Central Park Cafe, and then it sets the new stuff that I have here, rating and status. And then if I run this again, if I look at the new things that have come up, you'll see that there's a rating and status that's just shown up, in addition to this last modified. Now, one thing I'd like to say, though, is that I would argue that this particular code here is not user-friendly. And by that, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it doesn't really make much sense. But I think, though, that if you are to write your code, when you're actually working with it, when you're writing your update one code, if you're running, if you're actually entering things in manually into your interactive MongoDB, then write your code in a system that looks like this, because it's easier to write this stuff down. If you just remember that this is the syntax that you have to have to make things happen, then it's much easier to see your syntax when it's all spaced out like this. That's really how I have to do it. Otherwise, I easily get confused. But just remember, though, that if you have this, if you have your first place right here, this is like your kind of your query for update one, your query that's looking for the Central Park Cafe, and then the second curly braces group that you have inside there, you have all the changes happening. And so you have this set, and then inside set, you have another kind of document, if you will. I guess it's all this stuff here. Let's see, where's the other document? It's this. So when you're doing a set, you have like set, and then you have like another document inside there. And I think that if you just spend some time actually kind of formatting your code before you actually implement it like this, then hopefully it should make more sense to you, and it's not going to give you a headache. And now coming back here, when I run this, you'll see that, for instance, when you paste it, it just comes out on a line, which is, I claim, extremely complicated, and it's really hard to see where the open and closing brackets are. So you may find, for instance, this is easier for you to use. Maybe it isn't. What I recommend is that once you find a way that works for you, to stick with it and keep using it. Let's go back and change this one here. This is we're going to change the resto in a cave, which let's see what this says here. So the rating was musty. That's not a very good sign for a restaurant. The status is dirty and full of rocks. We're going to add some more information here. There's one called kitchen quality. That is that there was a fire in the floor. This sounds like a terrible restaurant, actually. And then there's a note. The waiter was a bear who chased me. Okay, so maybe this wasn't a restaurant at all. That's kind of cute. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and come with me now back to the terminal. And when I paste this in there, you'll see that there really isn't much there. Although this is a restaurant that's in Paris, so it's got to be. It can't be that bad to be eating in a cave in Paris. Let me tell you. I'm going to go back and paste or copy all this, and then I'm going to paste this in there. And again, it's going to be using the update 1 to make our modifications. And when I go ahead and just paste this in there, again, it looks like very cluttered and kind of hard to read. But it does actually work. And what you're looking for instance, is this information down here. Acknowledged true. The acknowledged part is talking about the current, adding the date here, I think. Matched count. Modified count, you're basically adding one record. That's really what it means. As long as you see ones here, that's really all you're really, that's really what we need to worry about. Now, if I went ahead and did a DB restaurants find, I can just run this. Actually, am I doing this right here? I probably misspelled something again, haven't I? Let me just go ahead and rewrite that. AURANTS. Oops. Whoops. That's of course why it doesn't work. What have I just done here? I've just lost something here. So database. I'm going to just copy that. Find. There we go. I don't know what I was doing wrong. Something silly, I guess. Anyway, but still, so this is this information. This is the information from all my documents. If I type in pretty, and I do an open close parentheses here, you can see that you can actually or format everything until it becomes much more easily readable than this. And so there, my resto in a cave, everything became completely updated. And again, if you're working in your Docker container, I doubt that unless you've typed in special commands, I doubt that your time is going to be updated to the actual time that your system time is, like your actual computer time. And for instance, here, this is saying this is at 3:34, I guess, in the morning. And the actual time is 12:05. And so it's really completely off. But that's okay, though. I'm not worried about this because if you're running this on some kind of mission critical thing, then you might want to make sure that the time is done. But for the demo, I'm not concerned. Okay, I'm going to go back here and see what else there is left to do. And by the way, I will say that Mongo is the coolest thing. I will apologize for this image, but I just absolutely had to include it with these slides because when I typed in the coolest thing, I came across Mongo and this slide. And I thought this was just the coolest slide ever, the coolest picture ever, so I just had to put this in. Notice, for instance, how we have Chewbacca actually playing the drums. I would have put him on the vocals myself, but that's just me. But look at how Darth Vader's like floating on the stage. I mean, that is just the coolest thing. Again, apologies. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be talking about is how do you compare values in your MongoDB? How do you actually compare values? We've done this before when we did our constraints in SQL. We may have had a constraint where we're saying, everything that follows the where clause in a query, where salary is greater than 90,000 or whatever it was that we were using for our instructors table. So we have the same kinds of functionalities here in Mongo, which is actually quite exciting. But again, the code is not very user friendly, and that is because you probably have a machine actually running this code for you. But still, you can, after a while, you kind of get used to seeing this. And I'll just spend some time, actually, I'll just spend a moment here to talk about what we're seeing. But when we're working with the, like equality, for instance, equality is really on the first line of this green table, where salary is actually equal to 5,000. This command, this is a query, db.employees.find, and it says, give me everything, I'll go across the whole entire collection of documents, and give me all the information where the salary is equal to 5,000. Now, the next one down here is less than. And so this is saying go through and find out where all the ages are less than 30. And so how this works is that you see above where we had the salary, and then we had the colon, and then we had 5,000 in quotes. I guess if 5,000 were not a string, you could leave the quotes out. But in this case, though, because we're working with a conditional statement, that has to go inside these curly brackets, and that's just how Mongo works. And so we have age colon, and then inside the curly braces, we're actually working with our conditional, and we have $LT. LT stands for less than, and then we have that colon and then 30. So it does become kind of complicated. In fact, I have this written actually down here. It does become kind of complicated when you're looking at like loads and loads and loads or lines and lines of code. But I think though that if you memorize that $LT 30 means less than 30, and then what's less than 30? Well, whatever the field was that was mentioned before the colon. So I wanted to spend some time actually going through these and just kind of give you some ideas on how to use them. Here, what I'm doing is if you come back to the here we are, the terminal, you'll notice that each of these things, my restaurants here has a number here, average costs. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if there's a way of actually finding out, for instance, if there's like a restaurant that has an average cost which is less than 200. And so this is the query that I would use. And so average cost actually says go to a field. If this field exists, go to it, and then check out the number which exists there. And if that field is less than 200, then show it. That means to show that particular rec or document. And that means basically show these things about that document. So when I run this, you'll see that the Central Perk Cafe, the Captain's Cafe, the Resto in a Cave, which was for $1. That's just incredible. The Crowbar, which was for $40. These all met the requirements of being less than $200. Now, I can go ahead and change this if I want. Let's see. If I go back to my slides, you'll see that I can change this from less than. I can change this to GT for greater than. And so let's just try that and see what that does. So if I go back here, I can go back and change LT to GT. And what this is saying now is look for all those documents for which the costs or the average cost is greater than 200. And so that's why I'm getting this information here. So these are how you'd write your constraints. And we've done this 100 times in SQL. And I think it's a little bit more easy to read in SQL. But here, it's a little bit more complicated where we just have to kind of get used to this new code. But it is a perfectly viable database, though. And it does actually do some, it does make sense after a while. But you probably have a machine doing this, actually working with this in this code for you. You wouldn't actually have people typing this code. I wouldn't have thought. I mean, you could do, but I wouldn't have thought they'd really have that many people actually typing this code. Another thing you can look at is, for instance, we talked about less than, but now we have less than and equals. And so LTE, less than or equals. In fact, you can see the mathematics on the right-hand side, where age is less than or equal. That means that age could be 30 or age could be less than 30. And that's still true. And then we have over here greater than. You still have greater than or equals. Again, you have GTE, where age is greater than 30 or age is equal to 30. And so you have that kind of logical constraint. The next thing is not equals. What if we want to make sure that we're finding restaurants that are not equal to a specific value? Well, here we'd have, again, the NE, not equals. And that is just $NE30. Let's go back and try not equals and see what we get. So if I come here, let's say that I'm expecting to find the Empire State Pub at $300. Let's say that I'm going to put, I don't want to see that result coming up. And so I'll just say, give me everything that's not equal to 300. And so you'll see that, let's see, I'm looking for, basically all these records should come up. All the documents should come up except for the Empire State Pub. And that's really what we see here. For instance, if I type in show collections, we have this employee database, db.employee, and then I have find. You can see everything is there, and I can also do a search for instance, giving all the information about age. Actually, no, I wouldn't put that there. I'd put it right here. There we go. This is all the age information that I have in these documents. And in fact, I can even put more information or ask for more information from this, where I have, what is it? I have to go back through my thing here and find out. I have name. Where is it here? I'm trying to find out I have to figure out what the attribute's called that I'm going after. Is active last's name. Okay, so I have name.last. That'll be fine. So if I type this here, oops, I keep pushing the wrong button. Name.last. There we go. So now I have the last names, and I can even put in the first names if I wanted them. There we go. So those are all there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find, for instance, all the people who have names or have ages between, say, I don't know, 33 and 23. So that would basically say, give me the names of people who are between 27 and 31. And that is exactly what I put together in my slides, which does take some time to... Actually, it's between 25, but we can modify this. But it does take some time, though, to put these queries together, just because... You need to unfold everything in an editor and then work with it there. But I don't want to spend the time right now to do that because we're kind of running out of time. But if I go ahead and run this query here, you'll see that what it's done is it's looking for, give me all the ages which are greater than 25 and also those ages which are less than 31. And so this is why I'm getting, for instance, less than 31, greater than 25. That's where these ages are coming from here.